Today we welcome Lisa Johnson,
Yay, Justin!
who is a very dear friend of mine, and she is a retired advertising executive producer. After 25 years in the business, she retired to help her aging parents who were dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's, uprooted her life, her very successful life, might I add, in Los Angeles to move back to Minneapolis to care for them. So Lisa has just been through it. She's just lost her mother, and I'm sorry again about that, and had to handhold her very close, beloved father through this whole process. And he now also has, is it Alzheimer's or dementia that your dad has?
Alzheimer's.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I appreciate you coming on today. We appreciate you coming on today because at some point, a lot of us are going to have to go through this. I know I'm going to have to go through this with one parent, at least. And you have learned so much in the past 6 years now. You've been on this journey where you left and have been dealing with this. So I'm very anxious to hear the insight that you've learned and help everybody out on this journey. So my first question for you is, at what point did you know that it was really something that you had to uproot your entire life for to head back? Because, for instance, my mom has little memory lapses here and there, but I'm like, oh, it might just be aging. It might just be, I have memory lapses. At what point do we feel like we've sort of crossed that threshold and need some serious help? Did you do tests? How did you determine that?
When my mom was about 72, we noticed that she was starting to get a little forgetful, just like you mentioned, that happens in a lot of people who are aging and stuff. It's a natural progression to get a little forgetful. And it got to the point where I would start getting phone calls from my dad, concerned phone calls from him, that things were being forgotten, that were starting to get a little bit more worrisome for him. She would cook and leave pots on the stove and forget that she was even making lunch or soup or what have you. She would go golfing with her friends and she couldn't keep track of the score and that kind of stuff. So she came to LA to visit me over Christmas of 2015. And by then she was starting to repeat herself. That's one of the very early signs. They start talking and repeating themselves, asking the same questions over and over again, not remembering that they asked the questions, that kind of thing. So we knew then that we were kind of getting into this territory where we knew something was going on. She absolutely refused to go to the doctor. She did not want to know that this was her problem. Even being encouraged by my dad, and my dad being a physician then just went into caretaker mode and started doing everything, started to be her brain, started doing all the cooking, started doing all the cleaning, all the stuff, just making up, as I always said, he was his brain and her brain. So he was really on overload, and it got to a point where he just started calling, and it got worse and it got worse. And he just couldn't handle being there by himself, taking care of a house, taking care of her, trying to do everything. So we kind of, as a family, they lived down in Texas. And at that point, I think you remember, Ashley, I left LA and I went to Texas for a while and worked to be closer to them so that I could go down and make sure they were okay, give my dad some relief, that kind of stuff. And that went on for about a year until collectively as a family, we just said, you can't do this anymore. You can't run a house, run my mother, do all the things you do. It's just too hard on you. And at that point, my dad was fine with that. So we moved them back to Minnesota into an independent living, but a senior living home in order to give my parents some help. And that's when I moved back to Minnesota so that I could be close. And
well, I remember when you made that announcement too, because Lisa is one of my best friends and one of my closest friends, and I saw her pretty much every week, every other week. And all of a sudden I get this, hey, by the way, I just sold my house and I'm moving back to Minneapolis. And I was like, what? And to your very wise credit, you were like, well, if I'd have told you, you'd have talked me out of it. And I'm like, yeah, I would have.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I wish you would have.
How long did you know how much your dad was doing before you kind of intervened? And did your dad kind of not hide it from you guys, but sort of downplay it a little to where he thought maybe he could handle it and you guys weren't fully aware of the whole situation? Because he is a physician, right? So maybe part of him thought
Dina.
that he could, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And he did that for about 3 years. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and it honestly, I think that has attributed to his own disease. They say that caregivers, especially older caregivers, really have a propensity to dive quicker or into dementia of some sort because of the caregiving aspect. And so,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I truly believe this is the case for my dad. It is the stress of it. It's the not having, and again, there's a lot of help out there. There's a lot of support out there. You just have to be willing to do it. And as physicians, it's heal or heal thyself, right? They're so bad at taking care of themselves. They're great at taking care of other people, but not of themselves. So
he's so stubborn of like, I can take care of her and I'm not going to bring somebody in. But then he, as a physician, probably knows the fact that it is so hard on the caretaker, but it still didn't matter because he was going to do it no matter what.
Right. And I think he went into this whole different mode, sort of ignoring what he already knew to be true, because you're a physician on the one hand, and you're also in love with this person that you've been married to for over 50 years. And how do you do that? Right? You're watching somebody that you love start to fail, and you really can't do anything about it, because especially when they're refusing to go to a doctor and get any kind of help that might have helped her. Right. So a very, very frustrating time for my dad. And he hid a lot of that from us, and none of us lived close at the time. So we didn't know. We only noticed when we went to see them and started to see just the things that you normally would see at our house, be spotless, and there'd be, the garden would be beautiful, and things just were starting to kind of not look the same and not be right. And I think my dad was in denial for a long time too, until he just couldn't be in denial anymore.
How did you not become resentful?
I don't think resentment entered into it, honestly. It was more kick into action, and we have to help do something about this as much as we can, and allow them to also go through the process the way that they needed to go through the process. They still have a lot of pride. They still know that you are their child, and it's supposed to be the other way around. And I had to learn about how to approach, what boundaries there were, in order to even take baby steps to get them to agree to a certain level of care and certain things. And let me tell you, that was probably a 2.5 year process from the time my mom should have gone into memory care to the point where she actually did go into memory care.
Oh, wow.
You're the daughter, I mean, you're the girl that steps in and carries that weight for daddy's girl, essentially.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, you bring in the whole family dynamic too, and the brothers, and you're right. I mean, everybody has a different opinion. Everybody wants to do things their way, and
it's egos, right?
Oh my gosh. And just the struggle around what to do and where to move them, and who's going to run the show. And my older brother was the power of attorney and all that stuff. And he lives in Arizona, and so was not close to my parents at all. And I was running and there all the time and had no power at all. And he gladly turned over the reins to me so that I took over the trust, the power of attorney. I mean, that's the whole other side of this is the business side of things.
Right.
And when do you take the money over the money, and watching what happens, and it's so complicated.
Right. My mother was a nurse, so she's as stubborn as, what you're saying, your dad too, and the self-diagnosing and no, I'm fine and whatever, as an example. And then my sister-in-law also is in healthcare. My brother is in healthcare. So we've started conversations about what if down the road. My sister-in-law said that, I don't know if this is just a South Carolina thing, but you have to completely take over their finances and have them sign things into your name like 5 years before in order for, is it Medicare to cover things?
I think each state is different, but I think what they may be talking about is a 5-year look back, it's called. And what the 5-year look back is kind of a protection of assets, so that if your parent gets ill and goes into a facility, there's ways to protect your money so that all your money isn't being spent by being taken care of by private facilities. There's state-run facilities, there's private pay facilities. It's ridiculously expensive. One of the things that is hugely important is to get the your parents' financials in order, protected in a trust.
How does that work if you have siblings, right? And I get the power of attorney thing that person, but how do you integrate what your dad wants, what your siblings want, and what you want, or what everyone thinks, that's not want, wrong word, what everyone thinks should be done? And if not everyone agrees, how do you come to that sort of conclusion as a family without egos getting in the way? Because when money comes up, people get weird, and you never really know someone until they're not getting what they want. So somebody may go, well, they shouldn't be spending that much money on this for care or for this, because they're looking at the after effect of their inheritance being dwindled down, and they think maybe you could be taking care of her more and not spending as much. So how does that also come into play?
100%, 100,000%. And we went through all of it. So that's another thing that is hugely important when your parents are lucid before this disease comes on. If it does, you have to make sure that your parents know what their wishes are, get it in writing. I'm not an attorney, but it's, wills can be contested. But if everything is in a trust, it's a much better situation. And you then have to have somebody who is your trustee in case you are incapable of carrying out what your wishes are. So hugely important to have everything in writing and everything done, or else it's a mess. It is a mess. And Dina, absolutely everything that you mentioned will happen and does happen, even in the best of families and even in the closest of families. And we had that situation, and thankfully my parents had everything in order. And in 2015, I looked over everything again, and we amended the trust agreement, because there were things in there that no longer existed, things in there that had changed, that needed to change.
So how do you go about the subject of amending that? Like, do you broach the subject with your parents and going, hey, wait a minute, like we should change A, B, C, and D? And then does everyone have to agree, meaning your mom, your dad, whoever else? Like, how does that work when you amend it?
Yeah, when you amend it, it's whatever your parents want, right? And they can take the advice of their attorney, their estate attorney, their planning attorney on what they should do and how they should do things. But it's really up to them and what they want without outside influence from their children, because then it's fair. And so when push comes to shove and decisions need to be made and things start getting doled out, the person who's appointed the trustee could be a family member, could be outside the family, then doesn't have to have any responsibility in, or nobody can say, well, because you were the trustee, you're getting more money. It's like, doesn't have anything to do with me. For example, it's a pretty good example. So my brother wanted to look at my dad's finances and see where he was, his money was being invested and how it was being invested. And I said, well, I'm happy to have you look at it because I was the keeper of it. And I said, you can look at it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that anything is going to change.
Sure.
And so he had to look at it, and he said, I think this, and this, and he could do this, and blah, blah, you know, it was a whole thing. And I finally said, it isn't your money.
Yeah.
You're acting like it's your money.
Amen.
And I said, you might take your money and invest it in the ways that you're talking about investing it, but it's not your money to do that with. So this is Dad's money. This is the way that he wanted it dealt with. This is how he wanted it invested. It has nothing to do with you. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to change it because you think it is, because it's not your money to deal with. When you
that's
have
where the
that
ego
sort
part
of,
comes in. Sorry.
Absolutely.
No, I'm saying that's where the ego part comes in, is like, you never really know someone until situations like this happen. And then someone's like, wait, and they have different perspective. And like you said, it's not your money, it's Dad's money. He worked his whole life for this. And
That's
this
right.
is why people are apprehensive about letting people look into stuff or doing stuff prematurely before something happens, because everybody else's opinions on what should happen with their stuff, they feel like, wait, I'm not dead yet, or I'm still a viable human being. Like, what are you talking about all of my stuff for? And then that becomes weird.
Yeah. And in my brother's defense, he really was trying to be helpful, because when you have two parents with Alzheimer's and dementia, get ready, because it's damn expensive. So he was trying to make sure that my dad had enough money for the rest of his life and the rest of my mom's life. He was trying to be helpful, but at the same time, it still wasn't his purview to do that. So, but
there are a lot of people that are different than your brother, and they do try to go in, they bulldoze, and then they take over, and then everyone's in, disarray, and then everyone becomes divided over money, not even the health of their parents.
Right. You need a very trusted person to be your power of attorney, because that person is going to be making decisions for you around your care, around your comfort, around everything.
Right.
It's a huge responsibility.
It's not just financial.
It's not just financial.
Health decisions, it's all of it.
Yeah. So
end of life.
End of life decisions. And again, before all of this happens, so that you can make decisions easier, is map that out. Your healthcare directive, what you want. I knew my parents didn't want any heroic measures taken for end of life for them, to the point where it was, if there's a urinary tract infection or pneumonia, all you do is pain management. They didn't want it to be any antibiotics to be given. Wow. So again, they set this up and make those decisions together for how they want it. And then the person who's the power of attorney carries that out and makes those decisions. But it's a lot easier to make those decisions when you know exactly what the person wanted.
Right.
Because if you're left just, trying to decide, then again, everybody is going to have a different opinion about what care should be given, what care shouldn't be given. It's just, I cannot express enough how important it is to have life planning, healthcare planning, financial planning, wishes all written down, and do it not when they get older either. I mean, you really want them to be of sound mind.
Right.
And I mean, it's important for all of us to do it too.
Sure.
For sure.
At any age. But
what happens if, let's say, hypothetically, your dad and your mom said everything that they wanted, and then as your dad or mom starts losing their memory, and let's hypothetically say one of your brothers now disagrees and thinks that they should be given antibiotics for a thing, and it's written in their papers that they don't want that. Who wins in that situation?
The power of attorney and the paperwork
Okay.
win.
Would someone have to fight it? So, like, let's say if hypothetically your brother, would he have to go and try to fight that to keep them alive or something? Or, and then do people, does a hospital get to treat her or not treat her? Do they have to go on the directive of the power of attorney first? And then if someone wants to fight it, they deal with that later?
They always go with what the paperwork says first. So
Okay.
if, for example, you wanted to try and keep your parent alive no matter what, if their paperwork says no antibiotics for any type of infection, they could go to the Supreme Court. It's not going to stand up. I mean, it's just,
Wow.
and that's why it's that those documents are so key, because you're even, and it gets very, very, very emotional, and it's very difficult even when it's in the paperwork. Trust me. And I am power attorney for my dad and was for my mom too, to get that call that there's an infection. And they will check, this is what the paperwork says, but just checking, to have that responsibility, even though that's their wishes, becomes a very emotional thing too. I mean, we don't want to let go of our parents, or we don't want them to be sick, or we don't want these things. So again, you have to make sure that whoever is the power of attorney is going to be fairly strong and be able to handle the kinds of decisions that have to be made eventually.
Right.
So,
and who's your support system?
Well, yeah, it's taken a while, but my brothers and I have finally come to being a collective front. It hasn't always been easy. I will say this though, having the power of attorney and being the representative has truly helped my brothers. I don't want to say get in line, because that's a little harsh, and that's just kind of not, but they've had to sort of solve, and it isn't me. It's not me saying, hey, I'm the one, I have the power. I am the one saying, these are our parents' wishes. These are the things that we have to carry out. And this is how and ultimately I am the person who has to make these decisions, but also that's a tough thing. And I don't want to have to make all those decisions by myself. And I would like support from you. So I would call my brothers and say, here's the situation. How do you feel about it? This is what I think needs to happen. And for the most part, there was agreement amongst us, especially when it got to the very end with my mom. And so that's very helpful, because when you're fighting or there's disagreement, or, somebody feels left out, or somebody doesn't feel like they're in on decisions or any of that stuff, it's kind of like, you know what? I have enough on my plate. I don't need to be dealing with this as well as dealing with that.
There and you're dealing with it all the time. Do you mind if I ask you a few intuitive questions just to get some intuitive perspective? Your mom was pretty stubborn, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you say that your mom wouldn't have agreed with the way your dad handled it when she first started getting it, and then maybe your mom would have liked to have things done a little bit differently for her, but your dad went and took over and kind of took care of her the way he thought she should be taken care of?
Yes, I think if my mom had had her way, nobody would have known that she had dementia. I think it was really hard for her to have it be talked about, even inside the immediate family. She loved being taken care of by my dad. And I mean, interestingly enough, most of her problems in her life were orthopedic, and he was an orthopedic surgeon. So she very much liked to be taken care of by him. But I think for her, this was such a shame-based disease. And in many ways, when you're still kind of cognizant of the fact that you're starting to forget things and repeating yourself, it becomes a very shame-based.
Well, because he was the
Totally.
last person she would want him to see her like that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like
Yes.
intuitively, that's what I get, is that they had such a great relationship. She would have preferred him to remember her the way they were together their whole marriage, give and take, loving, caring, beautiful, all of this. But when we get married, it's like in sickness and in health, right? But sometimes we believe that's not going to happen to us. And it was your dad's pleasure to take care of her, but still, it's like I didn't want him to have to take care of me for as long as he did and the way he did, and I didn't want for him to have to see me like that. Is just what I keep getting from her.
Yeah. So before she went into memory care, she stopped being able. Now, my mom was prim and proper and perfect, never a hair out of place,
I
impeccably
can relate.
dressed. Her nails, to manicures, pedicures. I mean, her house was perfect. She was a very well kept and put together woman. So when she started to not be able to do things like do her own hair, she stopped knowing how to comb her hair, how to groom herself, how to even dress. And my dad had to start doing all that stuff before I sort of stepped in, because this was another thing that, we alluded to earlier. Let's not let anyone know what's going on. I'm going to do her hair and take her to get her nails done, but she's going to look the same as she always has.
Right.
So,
Keeping up
I
the
think you're
appearance.
right. Yeah, keeping up the appearance. And I think when my dad started doing her hair and things like that, Dina, that sounds dead on. Like how that must have really pained her to have somebody take care of her like that. And I started to take her to get her nails done and things. And after a while, in the last year, I would go cut her hair because she couldn't handle being taken to the beauty parlor. She couldn't.
It
But
was a
and my
lot.
dad and I would say all the time, if she could see herself in the mirror right now, it would just not be a good thing.
Poor thing.
Because
It's so interesting because we all think we're hiding our secrets and things right until the very end. But it just goes to show you in life, no one gets to get out of this world without the veil being lifted in a sense. So really, she had no control at the end. And her hair and all of her beauty and that beautiful, whether it's a facade. Listen, I put on my makeup and everything. Is it a facade? No, I just really enjoy, like your mom probably did, taking care of myself. But at some point, there was a period of time where people had to see her for everything she was without all of that. And I'm sure that would be her worst nightmare. And that's probably why she chose not to remember it, because the fact that I don't think if she was sick with cancer or something like that, she would have been able to go through it the way she did this way, right? But with your
mm-hmm.
dad, don't make the same mistake as like keeping up appearances, meaning don't spread it to the world. I'm not saying that you asked for this, but I'm
Too
just saying
late.
in here
Sorry.
intuitively. I know, sorry, but intuitively, I just feel like it's like yes, your dad's the respected doctor with the beautiful wife and the good family, and how would you do things differently now with if it's happening with your dad than you did with your mom? Would you let more people in for support?
I think there are always blessings in everything that happens. And I, I, that I have two parents going through this is, is
Oof.
sort of daunting and unbelievable. But the blessing in having gone through it with my mom is that I have so much knowledge and background and experience in what we went through with her. Taking it forward in dealing with my dad has made it a lot easier. And there are so many things that you are willing to let go of, and so many things that, and he's a different person, and he doesn't, he knows that he has what he calls a memory problem. About a year ago, it was quite disturbing to him to find out that he had early stage Alzheimer's. And now, a year later, it'll be 2 years in August, I guess. He knows he has a memory problem, but now he just doesn't really know what's happening to him. But I see all the things that happened with my mom falling in the exact same patterns as my dad. Wow. So we do talk about it. His friends know about it. I've communicated to all of them. They see him a little bit more and have seen him a little bit more and have asked about it because it's pretty obvious what's going on. So yeah, there's no secret, and it's much easier if people actually know what's going on, because people get blindsided. Like if you don't know, then you think, what's wrong and what's happening and why aren't we talking about this?
Exactly. And people don't talk about it. It's like, it's this private thing and nobody wants to talk, and I'm so happy that you're talking about this right now, because you, if you're willing to share this too, I know learned some things in the process of your mom that might make it easier on your dad when it's his time, right? That you don't have to drag it out as long as maybe we thought we did.
Right, exactly. And the things like, and the signs that you see along the way that maybe you didn't see before, that fall away when they start wearing the same thing every day, and they stop showering every day, or they don't brush their teeth all the time, and they stop eating a lot and forget that they've eaten. Or my mom would have a glass of wine and say, well, I haven't had any wine. And it would be 5 glasses in, and we finally clued in. It's like, okay, get the non-alcoholic wine, because she has no idea.
Yeah.
And now I know that.
Were you joining her with each glass too? No.
Yeah, out of necessity.
Yeah.
Medicinal purposes, right? So now my dad doesn't know I do this, but when we're together, I do half wine, half water. I give him a little teeny bit, maybe a third and 2/3, because he just doesn't know how much he's drinking. And it can be very dangerous, and with the medicines he's on and stuff like that. So probably wouldn't have known that.
Is your mom's genetic? And was your dad's triggered by taking care of your mom, like you said before, how sometimes caretakers, it can sort of, trigger that? And then how does that scare you and your siblings about that maybe this could be your future?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. Especially having 2 parents. It's such a mystery still, and they're starting, thankfully, to figure out more about prevention. And if you take that data and compare it to my parents, it seems likely that my mom maybe had more of a predisposition to get it because of her lifestyle, but nobody knows. I mean, and there are people who get Alzheimer's and they talk about the plaque in the brain, and there are people who they've studied who have massive amounts of plaque in their brain, but never exhibit any type of Alzheimer's symptoms or dementia symptoms. There are who had no plaque, but had very, very severe disease. So there's so much left to be known. When my dad had his brain scan and all his neurological testing, it was pretty obvious to them that his disease was in fact Alzheimer's. There's many different kinds of that too, many different kinds of dementia, many different layers and levels of this. Alzheimer's is just one of the diseases, but then there's several different kinds of Alzheimer's too. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
But did their parents have it?
Don't know, died young, all of them. it's troubling to all of us in the family, all three kids, because of
Do
the
you talk
potential
about it, or
genetic.
do you all avoid the subject?
No, we talk about it. We actually talk about it. One of the reasons I became a vegetarian is because there's research out there that says that a plant-based diet can have, bearing on whether or not you get Alzheimer's or not. Exercise is one of the ones that they're um, figuring out is one of the biggest prevention things that you can do to prevent it. And, getting good cardiovascular exercise, walking every day, not that hard. And Ashley knows I've always been this way, but you get one life, you just get one, and you might as well live every day to the fullest. You might as well, purge out the stuff that's not working for you. It's just like this stuff that you guys are talking about all the time, about how to get out there, live your life differently, make subtle changes so that your life gets better and that you are living that. So, I mean, I just turned 60 a few months ago, and I'm thinking that my mom started exhibiting symptoms at 72. That's 12 years from now. I'm not wasting a minute.
Good girl.
So yeah, so there's that's another kind of little mini blessing. But yes, we think about this a lot. I think about it a lot.
And have you guys taken measures if none of you, like, do all of you have romantic partners? And have you talked to your romantic partners and then put all of your own plans into action, and that have your brothers, like, God forbid something, let's say, were to happen to your romantic partner or theirs, and then who would be stepping next in line to say what you would want for yourself, since you've all gone through this, to make sure it doesn't happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How has it taken a toll on your relationship with your romantic partner, and how did you get them to move across the country to be there for you and your family, and have it not take a full toll on your relationships?
Do you have 5 or 6 days we could talk about? Oh man, the navigating in this whole situation has been incredible. I have a number of incredibly close and dear friends, including this one here, Ashley, who have been a support system for me. I have an amazing husband who I don't even know how he has put up with all of this, because our journey together and my parents' journey kind of started at the same time. And so we've been together for 7 years, and I've been dealing with this stuff for 6 years. And sometimes I'm amazed at how we've been able to walk through this, but he's an incredibly generous human being, and kind, and just sort of gets it and doesn't complain. And, I have to be very, very careful about not taking advantage of that sometimes, just assuming that everything because of the way he is, and give him breaks, and, be really extra special nice, and make sure that I'm paying enough attention to him. And
put out a little now and
but
then.
I'm telling you, I've had a couple of well-meaning friends say things to me like, offer up suggestions about how to deal with this, and just walk away and just take that vacation and just turn your phone off.
Oof.
And it's impossible. It's impossible.
Easier said than done. Yes.
To do it, because, and in the last 2 years, I literally have been on call 24/7. 24/7. And it is just in the last, since my mom passed away and my dad went into a higher level of care because of his own symptoms getting worse, that I feel that I have my life back a little bit.
A little bit. Yes. My ex-mother-in-law, literally 3 months after they moved from Rome to the town where they live in Abruzzo, the father had a mini stroke and then got dementia from that. And they never even got to enjoy when they retired. And then she said she didn't sleep for 3 years straight because she was the only one taking care of him. And we would have to get locks for the doors because she would find him, he would get the days and nights confused. So he would think that the middle of the night was 5 in the afternoon. So he would try to leave and go walk to the bar to have a thing, and they would find him face planted in the snow. And, she was panicking, but because they're so private here in Italy, is that they didn't want to let anyone know about, so she sacrificed herself in all of that, right? And then he got very aggressive, which I think a lot of people don't realize is a lot of dementia and Alzheimer's patients can get very aggressive. And he would sort of, shake her and push her against the wall. And that's when other people sort of had to come in. But, we were living in Rome, and the other daughter lives in Rome, and who can come here all the time. And they didn't have the money to have someone. So it was all on the mom, who was the same age as the father. And so I wish that for them, it wouldn't have been so hard on the mom, because then the guilt that everyone feels, and then the secrets. And why is it just like the community, we can't come together and support people? Yeah. Here's a day off. You go have lunch, take a nap. I'll watch him. Because all you'd have to do is sit with him to make sure he wasn't hurting himself or, lighting a fire. But, because of the secrets, she sacrificed herself.
Which is terrible. And takes a toll on her big time. And it does fall a lot on the children. It does. I mean, you probably have good friends, but it's mostly family that ends up taking care, or you hire in people to come and help, which I tried to do, but my mom was one of those people that got mean, and she wasn't very nice to the people. Yeah. I mean, I'm so thankful that my dad so far is still in very good spirits and hasn't gotten mean. He gets very depressed sometimes, and so here's a small example of what's gone on. So my mom passed on May 10th, and my dad, of course, we told, and he knew, and you go through the grieving process, and it's very tough. But because of his dementia, he forgets. He forgets that she's dead. So there's this for a while, he would say, well, I think I need to go see mom today. And we'd say, oh, Dad, she passed away. And then he would have this fresh grief about it, because it was so new to him every single time we told him. And I got some very good advice, that just go with it, and just divert the conversation, or, he'll call me and say, I don't know where mom is. I think she went to a golf tournament. I'm not sure. I said, oh, she's probably just shopping. She'll be home. She always comes home. So you don't have to worry. But I'm afraid she's going to go, she might fall in the lake. I'd say, well, Dad, she hates swimming. She's not even get close to the lake.
Fall in the lake while she's golfing.
Right? Whatever. And
she's a bad golfer.
Very, nonsensical stuff. And he'll call me and say, it's going to blizzard today. I think a blizzard is coming, and it's 89 degrees outside. And just like, all right, I'll wear my coat. Thanks for letting me know, so that you're not constantly correcting and constantly sort of having to, and for your own self too. I mean, it's a little tough for me and my brothers as well to have to constantly say, she's dead, she's dead, she's dead, she's dead.
Yes.
Can we just let her rest in peace here? So it's those kinds of things that are for family members just really, really hard. And in the case of your ex-mother-in-law, it's the same thing. Taking that on all by yourself is just really difficult and really stressful and exhausting.
It's so hard. My Uncle Vinny, unfortunately, recently passed from Alzheimer's, and he would call me, and in the beginning, I didn't understand it. And he would say things, I'd be like, dude, what are you talking about? Because we would be on FaceTime. And then it wasn't until later that, I understood what was happening when I talked to his daughter and stuff. So he would call me and he'd go, Rita? And I'd be like, yay, hey, Vin, what's up? And then it was just comforting listening to the sound of his voice. So whether or not he was making sense or not,
Mm-hmm.
I just loved his sense of humor, and I would let him go on, and the phone would be upside down, halfway up his nose and his ear. Like in the beginning, I would try to correct it. I would get frustrated. I would be like, it's not the same. He's not fair. And then like the person said, go with it. I went with it. It's hard to watch people you love sort of be a shell of themselves. So I can't imagine two parents at the same time, like one after the other. But thankfully, you have your support system. It doesn't mean it makes it any easier. But I have another friend who's going through it right now, and they don't agree with what their dad's doing for their mom because he's not putting her into a care and they can afford it because whether he wants to spend the money or doesn't or whatever, so they'll come over and she hasn't bathed in a week, and so it's like, but there's nothing they can do about that, so they've had to come to terms with that too. So many people get different ends of it, and I think you're in a more fortunate situation in the sense of you got to at least have a say of certain things or whatever, because as a child I can't imagine watching your mom not being taken care of the way you would want her to be, and then the dad doesn't let them in the house to have them help bathe her or have them see what the
Right.
mess is.
Well, the thing too, and I think it varies state by state, but the good news is for your friends, perhaps, there's just as we have child protective services, there are senior protective services, and you can get somebody to go in, an agency to go in on a check-in visit or a well visit, and if she isn't being taken care of properly, they can take steps to get her into a situation or get proper help to come in or something like that, an outside service that will tell them,
That's good to
you need to
know.
bring in help 3 days a week, or we might have to remove her from the home. So it's just like you take care of your kids. Yeah.
Yes. Well, after all of this, I feel like you've learned so much. Would you ever be willing to do advocacy work for people as like, are you still working in your old kind of career, or are you looking to do other things? And like now that you've learned to navigate this system, it could be so useful for people.
That's a good question. I think if I wasn't going through this with two parents, and I do have a lot of knowledge that I never knew that I would ever have to have, and have learned a lot. And I think for me, it's maybe I can do that once I get through this, right?
Of
maybe
course.
once my dad passes away or something
now.
like.
Yeah,
I was gonna say right now.
Yeah.
After a couple of years of getting, proper sleep.
Well, because you
and
didn't
just
learn all this information for nothing, right?
Right.
You clearly
Yes.
learned this for something. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be about dementia or Alzheimer's. It can be about child advocacy or, anything that has to do with.
Oh, yeah. Navigating the finances of it and navigating, there are things that people just do not know and they don't tell you. And let me tell you this, there are things put in place for people to help them pay and stay in the same facility and not have to go to a crappy, scary state-run facility just because they can't afford to be in a privately run facility. And there's all sorts of information out there. And, online is a great resource, but if you don't even know the questions to ask, it's really tough.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Because everyone goes through the worst case scenario of like, we can't afford it and no one wants to put her in A, B, C, and D. And no one knows that is true, right? Like what you just said. And I'm sure they don't advertise it because they don't want a bunch of people doing it. And so, like you said, to knowing the questions to ask, it's like even coming up with a list of questions for people or whatever it may be. It's just so amazing and incredible insight that, you have to share.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll bring you back on to continue asking you questions.
Sure.